Hi everyone, this is Diane. I can hardly believe I have these journals ready to show you finally. It's been a long time. I started pages for this one months ago, or at least weeks ago, but it's probably been months. But that wasn't a serious attempt to create the finished journal. I just wanted to start on trying some of these kinds of pages out. So anyway, I've been working on these, and then I went to Florida for 10 days, and then I came back and finished them finally. So I'm going to just show them to you. This is the one I'm keeping, so I'll show that to you last. This is the one that will be in my shop. It's a book that said it was called Machine Design, and it's embossed or debossed on this cover. I hope you can see it. And I put this burgundy plaid fabric on the spine, and I used burgundy thread to sew in 3 signatures with a 5-hole pamphlet stitch. And I put this pale mint green lace here because of the green color on that label. These 3 pieces are all vintage. This is a French flower seed label. This is a pharmacy label, and this is another kind of pharmacy label. I didn't put anything on the spine. There's so much going on inside. I left this plain. And I don't have a tie closure just yet, but I'm going to see if I can copy dye this. I think it's got polyester in it. I don't have any muslin or not big enough pieces. So I'm going to try to copy dye this and sew 2 pieces together, and then I will fold it in half and stitch it. And that will be the tie. I did pretty much fully embellish this journal, but I am including a lot of ephemera also. So here is a vintage 1954 date book pocket planner thing. This is a little brown envelope that I put gesso on. It's been in my stash for a long time. So you can use that in your journal. And I also included 8 little black vintage photo corners that you can use. Some tickets. Copy dye those if you want to. I have some digital pieces. This is a copy of a label that I actually purchased. Some kind of grungy, but yet some colorful pieces to go in your journal. A couple of Cricut cut tags. You can decorate them how you'd like. Some digital tags. This little sack, you can embellish it and glue it on if you want to. I have several guest check colors. And there's a coffee dyed one. There's another digital tag, and this was a fold over tag. So I just glued it together. There's a little dime coin holder. This is from a book about a word. It was a word book. Like, it's not a dictionary. It was just words. I'm not really sure what it was for. Maybe for spelling. I don't know. But it's fun. Blank receipt papers. And some scraps of some of the papers that I used to create the pages. Some little digital labels in different colors. A floral, or this is a dish garden hang tag. This is a bona fide vintage tag because I had 2, maybe 3 of these. So I will use one in my journal and I'll give one away this time. U.S. Customs in bond. So that's an interesting tag. And then this is another bona fide vintage tag. I got a collection of stockyard tags at a flea market. So this is Livestock, Newark Stockyard, Harrison, New Jersey. A couple of vintage kids cards. And that pretty card. And just another piece of that home ec teacher's coupons and order forms, some green stamps, and a little cluster that I made a long time ago. I stamped handmade is best there. That's a stamp, a little digital, and a vintage foiled label. So all of that stuff comes with your pack. So I'll try not to take too long in going through these journals. This is 9 and not quite a quarter, so by not quite 6 inches. And the spines are 2.5 inches on both of these journals. I made them a bigger spine because it's their fat signatures, and I don't remember how many pages are in there. At least 11 pages per signature that are folded, so that's 44 pages per signature times 3. So I'll figure that out and I'll put that in the listing. This is a vintage shipping label. I covered up the person's name that wrote on this. This is a piece of marching band music, and I wrapped it around here, so there's a pocket here and here, and this started to tear, so I put a little piece of vintage cellophane there. This is a tag made with vintage gift wrap, and I added this little netting fabric there. And I did a lot of stamping in these journals, and there's quite a bit of black stitching. And in addition to stamping on the pages, I added pieces that I had already stamped on and had cut out. So that's what these two are. This is on coffee dyed tracing paper, and that's on file folder. And that's a vintage Denison label. That's a digital label. This is a vintage beverage tag or label, and this is a printable label. This was a paper that I had used on my desk when I was playing with alcohol inks. I added this pocket that I had made with a file folder and various stamps, and this was just part of a masterboard that I had cut, and I glued limited edition on there. It's a stamp. This is an Edith Holden page, and I added a digital tab on there. This is a file divider card, which is pretty cool. Can you see the embossing? So it's debossed. Well, it's partially embossed. I've never seen anything like that. And it has it on this corner too. On this side it's covered up, but I glued this piece. You can write on the whole thing. Just added some stamped elements there for fun. Another collaged piece of paper, like just leftover scraps that I sewed together and then glued some stuff onto them. And I stamped this and added this stamped piece, and this is a vintage drugstore label. There's a map page. It is folded here, but if you wanted to, you could make a tiny little tuck spot out of it, but it wouldn't hold much. This is a craft paper that I just kind of folded up and stitched for fun, and there's a pocket right here, and I included some digital pieces. Those are digital pieces. This is from a 1963 appointment book. This is a page of checks. They're perforated, but they're still solid even after I sprayed them. They're not threatening to tear. But they are checks that you could design your own checks and print them on your computer. And I got a stack of these pages at the flea market. And I added this little ephemera piece that I had made, and it was in my stash. I have 3 pieces of paper, random papers sewn together with a little scrap there. And on this side, I used these slide mounts, and I put these tiny little yearbook pictures in that, stamped on the background. So that's a little tuck spot, and I put in this vintage I think it might be 1913, because it says 191 here, but it has a stamp, September, or typing, September 23/13. So I think it is 1913. And it's for teas, coffees, and spices. This was a purchase of 60 pounds, sealed hot steel cut coffee, 28 cents a pound. So it was $16.80. Can you imagine? Another piece of paper that was stitched together. This is a collage page with strips I had left over from a project, brightly colored in this kind of grungy book, and a piece of game money. This is a stamped piece, and I've tucked in this little game piece of paper. So these pages are, almost all of the pages are stitched together. Some of them are one complete page like this. And this one was just kind of folded and stitched, and the map page is just one page. But most of the pages are stitched together pieces. There's another game piece here, money. I did a stamp here, and a digital, and a stamped file folder piece. So you do have space to glue things on yourself, add more pockets if you'd like. There's a stamped piece on craft paper. And this is a vintage label for a hotel in Brussels. This is the other side of that embossed file card. I just folded one flap over to sew it in. And I filled out the page with this piece from an embroidery alphabet page from a book. This is a cloth sample, and I sewed it on as a pocket, and there's a vintage postcard in there. Just a plain one that you can write on. I like this in the brown ink. And this is stitched to the other side of the Edith Holden page. On this page, I just glued this coffee-dyed window envelope. This was sent to me in a Happy Mail. I'm thinking it was Nancy of Wishes and Weeds. I've had it in my stash for a long time. So I think she just had the window part. It was coffee-dyed, and then she folded it over. I think that's really cool. And kept part of the flap part and made a new little flap. I think it's a really cute envelope, and you can put something in there that you want to put in there. I stamped flowers down here, and this is from a vintage yearbook, 8th grade class officers. It's a flap. You can write on this, you can write on this, and here I used a number stencil. It's a number 8. I stamped on it, and that's a vintage stencil cardboard. Second signature, we start out with the record sleeve of a 45 record. Looks like it's from the 50s. Capitol Records. And I just folded it over to make it fit. Added a piece of that German paper measuring tape. And glued a rutabaga seed envelope to it so that you can see the rutabaga through the hole. And here is a tag that I coffee-dyed and stamped on. There's a coffee-dyed paper, and I just added this embossed piece, and it's not a pocket because this would crack and tear if things were going in and out of it too much. So I just glued it there for for looks, and I added a vintage German scrap piece, flowers, and I stamped that. This page is folded up, and I added a die cut and a stamped piece, some play money, vintage play money, and this digital piece, which I think I printed on coffee-dyed paper. Yes, I did. So this was a digital that was made with a sample book, like a fabric sample book. I don't remember whose kit it was. This is a Yahtzee score sheet with a fruit label, canned fruit label on it, and a little piece of map. Oh, here's the rest of the map. So that was how this page was constructed. The game piece sewn to the map, and then I just put the can label across the whole thing, so you'll see the other side of the label. This is a tag that I made with a piece of scrapbook paper. Looks like mixed media, but it's just scrapbook paper. And this is part of the cover of that alphabet embroidery book. So you can write on the back of that. You can write here. This is a While You Were Out paper. And I used these little vintage cards from a children's card game. I think they were from a different country, and somebody knew when I showed them in my haul that day. Somebody knew the game and talked about it. I had two little sets that were different. I think they were different games, but they were both this size, and I think they both had the yellow chicks. Anyway, this one is Talk, and this one is Pick, and I think they're so cute. I did a stamp up here, and this page is a vintage craft book, like really old craft magazine or craft book page, and I sewed it to a piece of cardstock, pattern cardstock that goes all the way across, and I added those pieces. And this is an envelope I made with a ledger paper. You can put whatever you want to in there, and I added some stamped pieces. That's a digital, and that's a digital, but these are stamped. Really fun envelope. And on the back, I got this little tablet at a flea market, and it was probably for a waiter at a bar. And there's a little vintage beverage label for the neck, the neck of the bottle. This is a page from a nursing service binder that I found at a flea market a couple years ago. Added a piece of scrapbook paper, and this is a little vintage gift tag that you'd put on a package, a gift. This is from a book of quotes, which is really fun. So it has a couple quotes here, and I added some 1967 Easter seals there. And this is stitched to a little notebook paper right here. And that makes a pocket, and I put this Scotty's Tissues ad that I glued to cardstock in the pocket. And this is a little cluster that I received in a Happy Mail, and it has the word happy stamped on it. It's a very fun and happy cluster. Another Edith Holden page, a journaling spot, stamped stars, the nurse's report page. Here's the rest of that cardstock piece, and it has a vintage pancake syrup label that I glued to cardstock to make it sturdy, and it's a little pocket. I have this little tag with a grommet in it, and one of the home ec teacher order forms from a vintage book. And this is just a yellow paper with pattern tissue sewn on it, and I just stitched this little wrapping paper piece on for fun. It's just a little patch. There's a map page, and there's the other side of the raspberry can label. This is not glued to anything. It's not terribly fragile, but it's just a thin paper, so don't pull on it as you're pulling things in and out. This is a card that was attached to that fabric sample book that I had, so it can be written on the back. And this is an antique postcard. Well, it's not a postcard, it says trade card, advertising card. And I just realized that this map has a little pocket here, and I didn't tuck anything in it. So I'm going to put this card in here. Here's another, I'll put it this way so it doesn't slide around. There's another antique postcard. This one is a postcard, 1910. The writing was in pencil over here. You might be able to make it out. And it's embossed. It's got a, looks like a dachshund pulling a little cart with flowers in it. Pretty cute. This is a vintage paper, record of checks. And it had a date on it, I thought. Maybe not. But it is vintage. Oh, 1967. So this side is filled in, but this side you can write on. And this is the folded up page. We already saw one pocket. And I stamped a pen here. And this is from a vintage book about engineering or mechanics or something. I love the illustration on it. And here's the other side of that embossed piece, and I put that stamped image there. Here's another page from a mechanical book. And there is a tuck spot here. I'll put that in there. And I added green stamps, and you can see an illustration from the page on that side. And I stamped there. I chose a stamp that kind of would move around the hole there. Last signature starts out with a piano writing book. So it was full of the manuscript paper that you would write music on. And it's a really cool cover, I think. And it's pretty vintage. I stamped this notebook paper on it and put a stencil. This is a scrapbook paper, some cardstock paper, and I added this also scrapbook paper that looks like an old ledger. So I just glued that on so you can write on it, but I also added a stamped piece and this digital piece. And this is a pocket. So I put in a little travel size Yahtzee score sheet in there. And a receipt from a checkbook or a rent payment book or something like that. And this opens out. So here we have a digital of a definition of paper, and this is just a scrap of some dyed paper, and I added a vintage label up here. And you can glue something there. Here is a vintage label for dandruff lotion. Look at the pretty colors though. And this is a botanical book, and I think it was from a book called England is a Garden. This is a page from that old craft magazine, Treasures in Needlework, and I just folded the page, wrapped it around, and then sewed it. There's no pocket. It would be too fragile. There's another definition for optimistic, and this is a vintage Octagon premium coupon. You would save these. It's for soap, Octagon soap. I don't know if it was laundry soap or body soap, but I got a whole collection of these, and they would save these and turn them in like green stamps. Another Yahtzee scorecard and a planner page. This is not vintage. And I added a piece of a canned peas label and another home ec teacher order form and a very old photograph. Looks like it's from the 30s. It has their names, but there's no date. Here is a little piece from that quote book. It says, "A good plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow." And it's a quote from Wag the Dog. That's a digital. It's one of my digitals. I don't have digitals in my shop, but I scanned it and printed it because I did have it. I don't know if I still have it. And this is an antique calling card, Hattie Mae layer. It's very pretty. It was glued into a scrapbook, so it's got another piece of a card glued to the back. And there's a puppy vocabulary card, I guess, or yeah, I think that's what it is. Maybe it's from a children's dictionary, but it is a digital. And I stamped this image of one of those push-down stamps, and this is a real vintage postal stamp. It says COD. Here we have a little strip of a tape that would, I guess, be used to seal a package when you purchase from ML Perkins General Store. I received this in a Happy Mail, and it does not look vintage, so I don't know how old it is. This has 3 pieces of paper sewn together, another piece of that German measuring tape, And I stamped this Tim Holtz billhead stamp there, but there's room to write. This is some kind of a financial planning book page, and I put a vintage label on it, or tab, one of these. That's digital, and this is a real vintage stamp. And I just stamped a Tim Holtz alphabet here. We have an award certificate here sewn to a scrap of scrapbook paper, and I sewed glued another little children's dictionary image. It's a digital, and it's a turtle. This tag is digital, and this tag is a die cut. There's a die cut here and a vintage price sticker that would have gone in a vending machine. This is like a divider page. It's very vintage. It was in a binder, and I sewed it to a Daphne's Diary page. And this is cut from a file folder that had a grid on the inside, which was pretty cool, and another piece of play money. This one has two small pieces of scrapbook paper sewn together, and this forms a little pocket. So I put this digital inside this side of it, and this digital in this side. This is a canasta score sheet. It's partially written on. It's the other side of this paper. And I stamped that. We have another antique postcard. And it wasn't mailed. Oh yes, it was mailed. I don't see the the postal stamp where they stamp it in the post office. So I don't see a date. But it's old. Usually these kinds of postcards are from the turn of the century, 1900s. And this is just taken from a little notebook. It's just craft paper. You can write on that. You can write here. Added some lace. Some paper, not people, some paper that I sprayed with colors, sewed together, and I added this digital label there. Ventilated livery hats. This is a stamped definition for curiosity. And again, I folded this up and sewed it, and this is this is not digital. It's in a different language. I don't even know what it is, but it's some kind of a label, and there's a little tiny chick gummed sticker. I got a whole pack of those at an antique store. And this I made to be a pocket, so you could glue it on as a pocket if you want to, or you can just write on the back. I just tucked it in there, and there is a negative in here. Book page and scrapbook paper sewn together. That's a stamped and embossed piece, and that's a vintage label. And this is a piece of fabric that came off of the binding of a book when I took a book apart, and it actually has some writing on it. Pretty cool. I did some stamping on this page, and this is from a vintage magazine. I made it a tuck spot, and I added this tag to it. That's from a vintage magazine. This is a digital. There's vintage gift wrap behind it. Just a little snippet shows. And then here we have this from an old magazine, and this will be fragile if you pull on it too hard. This is just a lined page from a book that you could write on. And this is part of the cover of one of my, it's a wrapper cover, not the book cover that they came with. I'm sorry if that furnace was loud. I didn't even notice it until it shut off. These books came with like a dust jacket, and they were reversible. It's pretty cool. Uppercase books. I don't know if I finished my sentence, but I like that picture there. This is a stamped lady on a drop paper, so the alcohol ink I was playing with. and I stamped her on top of that. And she's glued to a glassine, a craft glassine, so it's not real heavy paper. And these are both digital pieces. And the last page is that cover of the music manuscript book, and I stamped the word photographs from a Tim Holtz set. This is vintage tape that was already on this book. And there is a 1957 tax, like a county tax or city tax, some kind of a tax. And because it says photographs here, I added a couple photographs. This one's 1947. This one looks older. And then on the back, I added this pocket that I had made with a very, very old ledger page. In fact, it says right there, 1825, 19th of August, 1825. There's a newer ledger page behind it, but it's on cardstock, so it's nice and sturdy. And I added this library card with a bit of vintage lace and a postage stamp, and I will put my signature on the back of that. So this comes hopefully with this coffee dyed, and if it doesn't take the dye, it will probably stain it some anyway, but I'll get that on there and you'll get all of this. I won't go into as much detail with this since I'm keeping it. I like the Tim Holtz fabric on it because it picks up, this red picks up the red in the pieces here. Again, these are 3 vintage labels. Again, we have music here and a collage and a stamped vintage tag. And this I wanted to put in mine because it's so unique and one of a kind. It's a beat up old, I think it's a luggage tag. Key to the World, it says. SITA, World Travel Incorporated. And it has the tour number here, but there's no date. And here I have a vintage card that somebody drew. This is all hand-drawn and written. Very beautiful. It's quite thick. Here's that octagon soap and a Bonnie Lassie, a new and delightful toilet essential. Doesn't say what it is. This is a note paper, and this is a digital envelope, and I sprayed it and stamped on it. We have a little strip of vintage gift wrap there. These are vintage labels. This is a stained glass coloring page from Dover Books, and I made a pocket with it. But I didn't tuck anything in that yet. And this is a city tax paper, and I use this little piece to hold it down. Handmade paper and a Peas can label. This is from that embroidery book, the alphabet embroidery book, and it's a little pocket that goes from here to here, and I tucked this. This is a postcard that I own or owned, and I made a copy of it some time ago. Put a tab on it. So this was a page out of the Dover Library book, the stained glass coloring book. So I just glued stitched the whole page across this Tim Holtz paper. Stamped image here, and a digital wallpaper or wrapping paper. And I love this 1907. It was a ledger book. It was a book that was turned into a ledger book. It was like an old composition book. But the writing is so tiny. Meal, I think it says 18 cents. 2 dozen eggs, 30 cents. Butter, 48 cents. This is an antique card, and this one is a digital. That's a digital, and this is a vintage Mallow Cup card. This is an antique card. And a digital telegram and a digital book cover, it looks like. That's a stamped and embossed image. That's a vintage label. Yearbook page, or photo. I played piano for our school chorus, so that could be me sitting there. Well, you saw me take it out of this pocket, so I know there's a pocket there. That's a stamp. There's a vintage German scrap floral piece. And there's my little card game tab. That's Tipple. Oh, I didn't put one on the back. These are vintage price cards for retail. And a piece of a vintage calendar, 1969. Here's the other part of that P, the can P label that you saw earlier. And a gift tag. There's an old photograph here of a little brother and sister. And I put a piece of it's an envelope that I collaged on in here. There's an old envelope here, and I put in a tag that I made with the cover of an old notebook, 1925 to 26. Iroquois Publishing Company, Syracuse, New York. And this is a vintage sarsaparilla label. This is another music manuscript book cover, and this song, Sailor's Hornpipe, I think, was taped inside. This is the original tape. I sewed around it to make sure it didn't come out. I think I need to put another little piece of vintage tape on it because it's torn there. Here is the fabric sample. I'm not going to pull this out. It's a stamped card and a card that somebody sent me in a Happy Mail a long time ago. Yeah, Sailor's Hornpipe. There's a little brown jug syrup label and a little coin envelope that I stamped on. This is a vintage airmail envelope, or label. This is a dyed paper that I had punched a circle out of, which makes a fun element. My folded up paper, it only has a tiny little spot to stick something in there. And it's a Sen packet. It's empty. So I was told that these are licorice tasting throat tablets, but they're very, very small. My grandmother used to carry a little tin in her purse that contained a little licorice flavored black tiny tablets, and they were terrible. They were called Helps, and I absolutely hated them. I tried so hard not to cough in church, because if I coughed in church, she would pass that little tin down to me, and I had to take one. This is an antique little label, very pretty. And an antique advertising card, and this I'm not sure what this was for, but it's like this really cool looking mug. And then the last signature, we have a vintage piano course book with a stamp. And this was a card. It's a trifold card. And I put this photograph on it so that it would show through there. Another calendar page here that I can use in the book. Collage. Here is a greeting card. And we can open it right up. Here's another can label. And it has this very old and fragile envelope that I had collaged on a long time ago. It's going to fall apart more if I handle it too much. This is cut from a greeting card, that sweet little girl. And it has this image cut from a book. I don't think it's a real postcard. I think it was an image in a book, and I glued it to cardstock. But this is a real postcard with that cute frog and the lily pad. And here is a 45 record sleeve. It didn't have a hole in this one, but the Rock and Roll Waltz, and this is a pocket. This was a travel brochure for Stouffer's Motor Inns. Stouffer's, the frozen food people. I don't even know if they still make frozen foods, but they had an inn in Louisville, Kentucky. And this was a folded, like you'd open it up big. I just cut it so I could just sew it in here as pages. There's a stamped piece. The other side of the record label or record sleeve, and I have one of those window envelope pieces that Nancy made. I think it was Nancy. And this is a vintage tag, baggage tag, and an antique postcard. Happy Easter. Very sweet. And this is the other side of that trifold card. This is a border from a greeting card and an antique billhead receipt. That's a stamp there. And I did the same thing on the back. Stamped photograph and added a city tax receipt and 2 photographs. I wonder how long this video is turning out to be. Yeah, we're at the almost 45-minute mark, so that worked out well. I didn't put a pocket on the back of mine. I just didn't want to cover that stamp. I don't know where I'll put a pocket, if I will. I could just stamp my signature stamp right there. I put my signature in my own journals now because I want my kids to know which journals I made. So it has that stamp on the front and the back, but I like it. Girard College, property of Philadelphia. So there's that one. But this one will be in my shop when you see the video. I'm not going to hang on to it and try to list it later because I'm not sure when it's going to go, when this video is going to go up. So it's just going to be in the shop when you see this video, and it will come with all of these goodies. I hope that you like this unique, vintage, grungy, eclectic journal. It was really fun to make. And I'll see you in the next video. Have a creative day. Bye.